Mick Jagger just may be rock's ultimate performer. His frenetic gyrations on stage combined with his ability to hold an audience are legendary. Yet when a band attains a level of success where they're always playing to enormous crowds, the problem of using the right blend of showmanship and technology to reach the whole audience becomes critical. Mick points out that after all, it's no good playing to a large crowd if most of them can't see you.
Now if you're playing a very large gig, you see, let's say, outside, you know, you've got some, I think, some people disagree, but apart from the music, you see, you can't really see the act. If it's in the daytime, you can't use any screens for video. So in outdoors, you should use some kind of showmanship or effect, because you've got to keep people entertained. Say you've got 75,000 people, 100,000 people, 50,000 people, less maybe, outside, you can't really see the band, they can hear them. Then I think they should have some sort of effect, which you can call showmanship. And then take that on the indoor principle. Indoors, when you've got 10,000 people, over 10,000 people, I think they should be entertained somehow, apart from just the music, because they can't see. And some people do that by putting big screens up so you see the person who's playing's face on it, which is quite a good idea, except that I've never seen it done properly yet. And that's quite a viable idea. And then there's other ideas to do as well, which is one of the ideas, what we did in New York, LA, Chicago and London, and we're probably going to do Paris to a certain extent, we try and play these very ugly halls, which are basically incredibly ugly, and try and make them a little prettier, and try and make them a little more fun than they are. That's all. I mean, that's part of it, isn't it? There's been a lot of criticism of the sound. We try to make it, we're not really, you know, all we did was use the sound system available. The sound the first night, I think, it's fair to say, was not very good. I think it's got better as it went along. But there was so many mistakes to make. It's a very difficult hall to play. I think there's so many people out on the road at the moment that are using the available European equipment. You know, there's only so much equipment available in Europe, and so many people are using it. You've got Elton John out on the road, David Bowie, Stones, and like we're having to share out, I feel, this sort of sound, because we can't really afford to bring in sound system used in America, which may or may not be better than what we're using now. But you know what I mean, just the transportation of it and the way it just happens. So we use English people, and we never used them before, you see. Whereas if we'd have used the American people, which we have at least used before on one tour, they would have at least known us as people. And so we had to start again with another English sound company. But it is a whole difficult hall to play, because it's a very huge cubic capacity. I mean, all it is just a very large space. Whereas most of the halls in America are much lower than this, you see. Though they hold the same amount of people, they're much smaller. You know, so you've got all this ground to cover, you know, in these halls. You've got the same amount of people as what we have in Madison Square Garden, in double the amount of space. And it's a really difficult sound for them. And there's really very few alternatives. The alternative is to not playing it at all, or playing a very small club only. To play in a cinema, which I don't think is really right. You know, you've got your ABC, you know, the Rainbow's closed. We're back in the Albert Hall. Wembley's fully booked. We did have it booked at one time, but it was fully booked for this month, and there was no way of getting in there. So this was all that was left. I didn't want to play in those calls because I didn't think that we could fill it up once. And you know, I thought once would be enough. And then when you said 3, I thought, well, 3, okay, 3. And then when it said 6, well, I said, well, 6 is a lot. I don't think they all come. But they did, so I was surprised.
One of the advantages of becoming successful is the control you can exert over all phases of touring. On the Stones' recent European tour, the band used an elaborate moving stage. Since we spoke with Mick directly after the Stones played Earl's Court in London, utilizing that moving stage, it seemed a good time to ask him about its design and operation.
It's 5 stars, right? It's like a lotus blossom, right? Or, it's kind of Arabic arches joined. And then it opens, and so the front of this, and it also slopes, it rakes from the back to the front. It's like 10 foot at the back and 5 foot at the front. And each one of the 5 stars goes in the middle. The middle is where all the outsoles go. And the rest of the parts of what we call the petals or the sides, and they can move up and down through 90 degrees.
The Rolling Stones remain today, after 13 years, one of rock's premier bands, although the constant whirl of recording, touring, and writing has proved to be as much a burden as it's been a blessing. One of the advantages of making it big in music, however, is the ability to travel and meet new people, something that suits Mick Jagger quite well.
I spent most of about 5 months a year in the East Coast of America. About 4 months a year in Europe, in different countries, and a month in the islands, and about a month in South America, 2 months in South America. Most of the time we were in America working. A lot of the time in Europe that was in the studio. The time in Brazil where I was writing songs, I was in holiday too. Also recording in Brazil, it's quite funny. I went down and made a record with this guy, and it came out quite nice. And then this year I could spend a little time in England and then go back to the East Coast. I think it's more interesting actually where one spends one's time. I mean, after a while, it sort of gets beyond being for tax reasons because it just starts becoming a way of living. Which is, when I used to live in England all the time, I was in really quite a rut in a way, because I was doing the same things every night. I was becoming a little set in my ways, I think, getting a bit up, living in the country and all that sort of thing, and thinking about settling down, and now I'm completely none of that at all, and so I've completely changed, and now I'm completely none of that at all. And so I've completely changed, for what I was. So, which has taken a long time for me to realise, 3 years, to actually be able to leave England, But I think that once you've done it, once you've left England, you've left it, Which I think is good, because it's always your home, But you've got to feel at home everywhere in the world, not just in one little tiny corner of it, which England is a very beautiful, tiny corner of the world. You've got to feel at home all right. And the rest of it, if you can, most people love to travel and think about doing all that, And if you can, then I think you should. There are people in movies and records and everything that are that, and I feel sorry for them, because they think, well, in Hollywood, and all that. But that's not where it's at, Hollywood, and if you want, and America is a great place, but I love the West Coast. I used to like the West Coast when I was 20, because of all the little girls and everything. And now I find it really makes me sick to go there, so I'm just...
When the Stones helped shape the course of popular music in the mid-'60s, Mick Jagger put forth a theory that every 10 years there would be a major development. In the 40s, it was Frank Sinatra, in the 50s, Elvis, and in the 60s, the Stones. Looking back on his theory, Mick admitted somewhat ruefully that the 70s hadn't seemed to produce anyone big yet, but he expressed a strong belief as to where it would come from eventually.
I think the biggest rock attraction in the world, very hard. Well, Elton John's the only new one was since I suppose, There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing new in it. But something new must turn up soon. It's just rock and roll is a sort of basic thing and just shit off from there. But you see, when you think back, when you look back on it, the music of the idols of the 40s and 50s is very difficult. And that lasted how many years? That kind of music, actually 30 years, more or less the same kind. I've seen them come and go. I remember when the Monkeys were the biggest thing going. I mean, they were very nice lads. I can remember Slade, which was the biggest thing in England. I can remember Art Bowen. What I mean to say is, they're all variations on the same thing. One always thinks that one's era is more accelerated than the next. You see, the thing about the crooners, they lasted for 30 years almost. Well, more actually, but I mean, that whole style of music lasted for 30 years. And rock and roll, when it first came out, you know, was given like it was just a fad. But it's gone on for 20 years, you know. So it'll probably go on for another 10 years, variations of rock and roll.